Boys, 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 boys. That's right, I'm DJ Wooldridge, and we are here talking about The Boys, Season 2, Episode 5, titled We Gotta Go Now. VoughtStudios is pleased to announce that filming has begun on hashtag Dawn of the Seven. 12 years of VCU movies have led to this. If you like movies about one hero, you'll love a movie about 7 heroes. Introducing newest member at Real Stormfront. See how the legend began in theaters summer 2021. This episode is directed by Batan Silva and written by Ellie Monahan. I don't know if the pandemic's going on in the boys world, but we'll see about that 2021 release date. Also, not to get off track right off the bat, but I have questions about how the VCU universe is structured, because we're just getting the dawn of the 7, but the 7 have been around for a minute. So like, are they just getting to their Avengers movie, 12 movies? I'm a little bit confused about the timeline. If Amazon wants to release like a rundown of the VCU movies, I wouldn't hate it. All right, the bulk of this episode takes place in 2 primary locations. One is at Butcher's Aunt Judy's place, and the other one is the filming of the Dawn of the 7. We'll get to that in a minute, although I loved that setup. I love seeing behind the scenes of how they make these movies in the Boys universe. But let's start with our boy Butcher. He's not doing so hot after Becca rejected him. In fact, he's on the classic anti-hero self-destruction path, picking fights in bars, and just generally getting ready to cash out. He calls up Huey and is nice to him, which tips Huey off that maybe not everything's great. He tells Mother's Milk, and MM immediately picks up with what's going on. And I gotta say, this is actually a really solid MM episode. This is just further establishing that he might be the MVP on the boys' side. He has some really great moments coming up with how to stop Black Noir, but I'm getting ahead of myself. On his downward spiral, Butcher goes to visit his Aunt Judy and reunites with Terror. Anybody who's read the boys' comics is familiar with Terror. That is Butcher's trusty dog, who's a big part of the comic and isn't really factored in the show. I even think in season 1 they imply that Terror's dead, but he's not. He's here, and it's great to see him. It doesn't take long for Huey and MM to show up, and it also doesn't take very long for Black Noir to show up, because of course he was following Butcher last episode. He shows up here, and this is one of those moments that reaffirms kind of how great the setup of the boys is. I know in the comics they sometimes take Compound V to be able to face the Supes. In this, no powers. They're like blue-collar Batman. Like they don't have anything going for them. And it's cool to see these characters that are so incredibly outmatched have to overcome characters like Black Noir. So MM, again, great episode for him, calls the fire department to at least stall Black Noir while they come up with a plan. Fortunately, it looks like Judy is a drug dealer, and she has a taffy room, which is her makeshift drug den / safe house. So they booby trap the house to hold off Black Noir to make their escape. Black Noir like trips every trap. I thought he was supposed to be some sort of like super stealth ninja. Apparently, because he has a healing factor and super strength, he doesn't really worry about that, and he like blows up the whole house. While the boys are holed up in the taffy room with Judy, Huey learns that Butcher actually has a brother named Lenny, who is from the comics. And similar to the comics, he was kind of like Butcher's voice of conscience or his canary, which now Huey kind of serves that function. But finally, we get to the big showdown. The boys are getting ready to escape, but again, Butcher's spiraling, so he goes to try and face Noir on his own, surely knowing that would mean his death. But of course, Huey and MM are not going to let that happen. They both come in to try and save the day. MM a bit more successfully than Huey, but both are injured. And seeing them down for the count is what revives Butcher's will to fight. And it turns out he had an ace in his back pocket, or at least he came up with one on the fly. And he tells Noir that he has video evidence of Homelander's son, and he'll use that against Vought. And it turns out Black Noir actually has a camera on his person, and Mr. Edgar calls him. Another great moment with Giancarlo Esposito, who again can just evoke so much with just his voice. And he gets on a call with Butcher, and they come up with a deal, a brief armistice for Butcher to not reveal Homelander's son. It was great seeing the boys, in particular Butcher, get out of this scrape, but I will say I am kind of looking forward to like a real legit throwdown with Black Noir. I don't know if the boys would have to take some Compound V to level the playing field, but again, of the 7, Black Noir interests me most. I'm interested to see like a final showdown with that character. At the end of the episode, Butcher gives Terror a Homelander squeaky toy and tells him to fuck it, which, believe it or not, is a callback to Terror's main skill in the comics, which is that he'll fornicate with anything Butcher tells him to. Gross. Meanwhile, Frenchie is following Kimiko around like a lost dog, and it turns out Kimiko is doing hits for the Albanians that involve her ripping a dude's face off. She rips a fucking dude's face off. It's insane. It's another moment of gratuitous violence on the show, and I love it. Now, to the filming of the Dawn of the 7, which is packed with amazing jokes, starting with the fact that they've tried to integrate Maeve's sexuality into the script awkwardly, and a jab at a Joss rewrite, which I can't imagine when this show was filming they knew how time timely that was. That probably would have been a pretty groan-worthy joke if it was just a jab at Justice League on its own. But now with all the controversy surrounding Joss Whedon's involvement in that movie, it's become even more edgy and kind of a better joke. But let's take a moment and focus on some of the characters involved in this shoot, right? Let's start with A-Train. Now, I didn't mention last week, but A-Train is out of the 7. They brought in his rival from season 1, and he's going to be replaced. Interestingly enough, his rival is white. Not sure if Stormfront had something to do with that. She does have a pretty racist moment with A-Train in this episode, so it wouldn't surprise me. But of course, he doesn't want to leave the 7, so his big final moment where he's supposed to leave, which again, this is supposed to be Dawn of the 7, and he's leaving. His line is even in the thing, like, I know this is Dawn of the 7, but it's time for me to go. Like, what's the timeline of the VCU movies? Anyway, he reiterates the scene, and of course, that doesn't fly. In fact, Ashley threatens to out his use of Compound V as a drug, causing his heart issues, and he'll lose his pension if he doesn't do the lines. So he complies, and he does it with the Homelander stand-in, which was another great visual gag. All the little digs that they got at film culture in this episode were great. Meanwhile, the actual Homelander is continuing to not do so hot. Apparently, he went to take care of a super terrorist off book and, of course, killed a civilian because he doesn't care about these things. A video of it went online, and people are starting to rally outside the Vought building to protest him, led by Victoria Newman, who we've seen in previous episodes. And despite the pleading of Ashley, Homelander shows up to try and defuse the situation, and because he's a big old buffoon, he just exacerbates it and even imagines killing everybody. And I kind of wish that wasn't a fake out. I know it would kind of derail the entire show, but I think it might have been more interesting to just really see him go off the rails. And it is terrifying to see the amount of damage he could do if he legitimately didn't care about his public image. And then I wonder, does Vought have things in place to stop him should he ever go off the rails like that? So this all leads to Homelander finally going to Stormfront with help with his public image, and she helps him create some memes that start to boost his ratings. And of course, that relationship continues to grow, but we'll get to that in a second. Queen Maeve, meanwhile, is dealing with the fallout of Homelander outing her in the previous episode. Not only again have they tried to work that into this script, but there's also a scene featuring friend of the show, Malcolm Barrett, returning to The Boys, where they try to come up with a marketing strategy for the best way to exploit Maeve's sexuality, and it is just as uncomfortable as you imagine. Because not only does it involve Maeve, it involves her girlfriend, Elena, and they're trying to pattern their relationship off of other high-profile lesbian relationships like Ellen's, which again is another joke that probably wasn't quite as timely or edgy when they wrote it as it is right this second. What's interesting is this whole encounter ends with Maeve telling Elena that she's going to try and take Homelander down, and it leads her to the Deep, who has gotten married. He also has a Katie Couric interview, and we see him doing a commercial for the Church of the Collective that is hilarious. In that commercial, we also see the chairman for the Church of the Collective, and I would genuinely be surprised if he didn't end up being a bigger player as the Deep kind of tries to reintegrate into the 7 and the Church of the Collective try to spring their trap, or however you want to phrase what they're doing. And Maeve kind of coerces the Deep because, again, he's super easy to manipulate into possibly helping her take down Homelander. And now into Stormfront, who we discover has figured out Starlight is the one that outed Compound V. She ends up meeting Starlight's mom and drops some hints there, and then Starlight sneaks into Stormfront's trailer, breaks into her computer, and discovers info about something called the Sage Grove incident. And then Stormfront shows back up and just lays it out that yes, she knows that Starlight is the one that released Compound V. And that's when Starlight, again, trying to use some of the same tactics she used against A-Train, reveals that she knows that Stormfront is Liberty. And they get into kind of a standoff where Stormfront oddly says, "You're going to be a big help to me." With what? It's an interesting question. It sounds like Stormfront has a bigger plan, and I don't know if it aligns with Vaught's plans. But again, I have a feeling that considering Vought has moved Stormfront around a bunch, they even explicitly say, like a problematic priest, that she is a team player and that Vought is using her for a strategy, and that maybe Stormfront's going to try and use Starlight for that strategy. Another interesting thing, Stormfront is on the phone with what appears to be a nurse, but of course that nurse is Shawn Ashmore, and we know that Shawn Ashmore is playing Lamplighter this season. And it's worth noting that Lamplighter's scrubs say Sage Grove, so it seems like there's some nefarious things going on there, possibly experimentation on the boy that he's talking to Stormfront about on the phone. Lamplighter was hinted at last season. He was one of the 7 that retired, and he's the one that Starlight replaced. Now in the comics, Lamplighter didn't retire. He was killed by the boys for killing Mallory's grandkids. Now you may know Mallory in the show as Butcher's CIA contact, played by Layla Robbins. And it'll be interesting to see if Lamplighter's backstory in the show aligns at all or echoes at all his backstory in the comics. I will say, since he appears to be chummy with Stormfront, that he's probably not that good a dude. Now, as I mentioned before, Homelander went to Stormfront to help him repair his image, and Stormfront continues to not so subtly flirt with him, and it escalates to them having full-on, super violent, super powered sex. They do the scene that was in the trailer where she has him laser her threats. And it's interesting since we know that Stormfront is longer lived. She was formerly Liberty in the 70s and now she's Stormfront, that Homelander has once again found himself into what could be construed kind of like an icky, incestuous, maternal type relationship. The boy has a type. Now we end the episode with Stormfront continuing to consolidate her power. A-Train is out, Homelander is in her bed, and she's trying to lay the groundwork to work with Starlight. It'll be interesting to see where all this goes. Again, I feel like they're trying to set up Stormfront as the big bad of this season. It will be weird if she is and they kill her off at the end of the season, because that'll be the second season in a row that they killed off like a primary female character. So I don't know if that's the way they're going to go. This was the first episode with everything going on with Homelander. They started to question if Homelander would make it out of this season. Like maybe Stormfront would usurp him as the big bad of the show. I don't know if they're going to go that route, but I do kind of appreciate the slight unpredictability of it. Once again, another solid episode. I think this is one of the best of the season so far. I'd give it maybe like a B+, A-, somewhere in the like low 9, high 8 category. What did you all think? What do you think Stormfront's main goals are? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, do all that jazz. Stay tuned to new podcast episodes and Lovecraft Country reviews on Mondays. You can follow me at DJ Talks Trash. You can follow the show at Only Stupid Answers, but on Twitter, you're going to want to yank the vowels out of stupid. I'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.